Saluton from BA. This is a Rorschach Multilateral update from the 14th of October 2025, a summary of what's going down in the world's major multilateral institutions. Beginning this week on a positive note, on Thursday the 9th, the UN Secretary-General welcomed a new ceasefire and hostage release agreement in Gaza, framing it as a possible route toward Palestinian self-rule and statehood. He urged all sides to use the moment to open a credible political path, which involves ending occupation, affirming the Palestinian right to self-determination, and envisioning a two-state solution. The deal comes after years of conflict, negotiations with the US, Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey, and mounting pressure from the international community to restart the stalled Israel-Palestinian peace process. Meanwhile, in Europe on Wednesday the 8th, EU ambassadors agreed to move ahead with a plan to cut dependence on Russian oil and gas by 2028. Most EU countries support the move, though Hungary and Slovakia are unsure. The EU wants to cut out Russian gas mainly to reduce its dependence on Russia after years of energy being used as political leverage. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Europe has tried to secure more stable and diverse energy supplies, while protecting itself from future disruptions or price shocks. Shifting away from Russian gas also fits the EU's longer-term climate goals, which include pushing for cleaner energy sources and cutting fossil fuel imports. On another note, on Friday the 10th, judges at the International Criminal Court declined a plea to free former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte while his trial is ongoing. Duterte's team had asked for relief based on medical issues and low risk of flight, but the court held that maintaining his detention is necessary to keep the process fair and intact. Rights groups praised the decision as upholding accountability. In health news, on Monday the 13th, the World Health Organization released data showing that in 2023, roughly 1 in 6 bacterial infections globally resisted treatment by standard antibiotics. Between 2018 and 2023, resistance increased in over 40% of the drugs tracked. The report covers 8 major bacteria and multiple body systems. The worst regions were Southeast Asia and the Eastern Mediterranean, where 1 in 3 infections is drug-resistant. In Africa, resistance to first-line treatments for some bloodstream infections exceeds 70%. The World Health Organization also confirmed that the Maldives has become the first country to eliminate mother-to-child transmission of hepatitis B, HIV, and syphilis. The achievement is a global model for maternal and child health programs. Still on health, on Wednesday the 8th, the Inter-American Development Bank approved a $100 million grant to help Haiti restore and strengthen healthcare. The funds will support renovation of health infrastructure, digitalization efforts, health system analysis, and improved delivery of services for both chronic and infectious diseases. Special attention will go to underserved populations like internally displaced people, return migrants, women, and people with disabilities. Haiti's health system is under extreme pressure. Gang violence has forced many doctors and nurses to flee, leaving fewer health professionals to staff facilities. Some hospitals have shut down or scaled back services amid shortages of medicines, equipment, and power outages. Ongoing road blockades and attacks disrupt delivery of supplies and patient access. The capital cut off from aid routes, crippling medical outreach. These strains combine with chronic poverty, weak infrastructure, and long-term underfunding to make basic care inaccessible for many. In some unfortunate news, on Sunday the 12th, UNICEF reported that at least 17 children were killed in an assault in a displacement site in North Darfur, including a baby only a week old. Another 21 children were injured. The camp houses families already uprooted by the ongoing conflict, and civilians are facing severe shortages of food and medicine. UNICEF condemned the strike on a displacement site and urged immediate protection for children and aid access. On Thursday the 9th, a new UN environmental program report pushed for a shake-up in how money flows into mining, especially for minerals key to cleaner energy. It warns that the demand for materials like lithium, cobalt, and rare earths is booming, but extracting high amounts of these materials poses a greater risk of harming the environment. The report argues for tying mining finance to strong standards, promoting recycling, full traceability, and giving communities in mining areas more say and rewards. In defense news, on Thursday the 9th, President Trump publicly floated the idea that Spain should be kicked out of NATO because its government balked at hitting the 5% GDP defense spending goal. He urged European leaders to pressure the country. Spain's prime minister pushed back, saying that the 5% target clashes with the country's social spending priorities and that Spain already contributes meaningfully to NATO missions. Speaking of the US, on Friday the 10th, members of the UN Security Council raised alarms over growing tensions between the US and Venezuela, especially after US military strikes on vessels tied to drug trafficking. Russia's envoy slammed Washington's actions as aggressive and dismissive of legal norms, while Venezuela's representative warned that an armed confrontation could be near. Some European allies pressed for calm and respect for international law, but the US defended its operations as necessary to combat drug trafficking organizations. Next up, on Thursday the 9th, the UN Development Programme released a new study from the Dominican Republic showing that AI use is already pretty widespread. Nearly 69% of people say they use it more than once a week. The survey found that many believe AI has helped boost their productivity or aided schoolwork, though most also feel it's possible that jobs could be displaced. Even so, more people think learning AI skills could lead to new work opportunities. The report also flags that fewer women express interest in STEM careers compared to men, pointing to gender gaps that need bridging. In some news on trade, on Tuesday the 7th, the World Trade Organization increased its prediction for the 2025 goods trade growth to 2.4% from the 1% it forecasted in August. Much of that shift is chalked up to a surge in purchases of AI-linked gear like chips, servers, and telecom hardware. On Friday the 10th, the International Labour Organization and the Canadian government kicked off a 3-year project aimed at improving labor standards throughout Thailand's rubber sector. It will zero in on workplace rights like collective bargaining, safety and health, and fair wages. The idea is to help Thailand's rubber industry meet global supply chain expectations and support reforms through training and stronger dialogue among government, employers, and workers. On Tuesday the 7th, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development published new data showing that about 9 out of 10 teachers across its member countries say they are satisfied with their jobs overall. The survey also found that nearly 3/4 would still choose teaching if given another chance at a different career path. For our last story this week, on Friday the 10th, the International Monetary Fund and Somalia's authorities struck a staff-level deal on the 4th review of Somalia's extended credit facility. The agreement highlights that Somalia has been consistent in carrying out reforms and maintaining performance under its program. Still, Somalia has severe economic issues. Its dependence on foreign aid and remittances leaves it vulnerable to funding shocks, while weather shocks such as drought and unpredictable rain patterns damage crops and livestock. Security instability and political tensions make it hard to have consistent governance and attract investment. The country also faces a growing debt burden. Even after recent relief, predictions say debt may swell again without more sustainable financing. And that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us. Did you know that the updates are only a small part of what Rorschach does? Check out our initiatives at rorschach.com/initiatives. See you next week.